Dog is eating the plant. Judy, get down. So yeah, signing to the major in 2004 is when we actually signed, and it seemed like, and it has panned out to be a very dire time in our world's history. I mean, the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, the initial shock and awe campaign, the amount of devastation and lives lost for a war that is now universally known as unjust, but at the time wasn't being discussed. So there was a few major pockets of people who were doing that, but in mainstream media, in art and music, it felt like there weren't a lot of us who were discussing this. And so there was no American Idiot yet, or anything like that voicing in the mainstream in opposition to the war. So in Anti-Flag, we've always seen ourselves as an anti-war band. That's what Anti-Flag means. So we saw that as a great opportunity to spread awareness, to discuss things. We weren't naive in any sense of us believing that we were going to sign to a major label and all of a sudden we were going to be a huge band, and the things that we were going to say were going to resonate with a lot of people. We just knew that we needed to find some way to justify our voice in the mainstream, and signing to the major actually did that. I mean, we were discussed in a lot of places where we were never able to get those doors open before until that time. So in hindsight, I think that there are some things that we would have done a little bit differently with the time, but I think that that's true is the case with anybody who would go back in a time machine 12 years and think about what they were doing then. But we were very successful in our own right of taking Sony's money and doing really good things that otherwise wouldn't have been done with it. So yeah, it's an interesting first question to start with. Yeah, I mean, it started simply with that anti-war message, and trying to find ways to disseminate that into places where it wasn't being discussed and wasn't being talked about, and specifically in music and art and punk rock. And we saw the scene growing to really big proportions in the post 9/11 world, where it seemed like more than ever people were itching for messages of empathy and messages that were different from what was being blasted out around at that time. Inside the band, there were a lot of discussions as to whether or not we should do it, and Pat, our drummer, was really against this move to a major, and he wanted to make sure that we got everything we got out of it. And the contract that we ended up negotiating and then signing with RCA was very unique. I mean, the language in it was so specific to us. It wasn't boilerplate by any stretch of the imagination. So in that sense, it was a victory. It was a 2-record deal. We did our 2 records with them, and we moved on. And again, we spent Sony's money combating depleted uranium munitions, which was something that they were using in the Iraq War. We teamed up with a congressman from Seattle to combat that issue, and ended up winning that issue, and causing depleted uranium munitions to be seen as illegal. It's funny that we're going to Australia and playing for Blood and Empire. The last track on that record is called Depleted Uranium is a War Crime, and I think it references that to a T. And then we also did things like started a nonprofit called Military Free Zone, which was combating a provision in a piece of legislation in America called the No Child Left Behind Act that gave high school students information to military recruiters, and that's something that we were staunchly against as well. And because of that work along of ourselves and along so many others, that provision was changed in the No Child Left Behind Act, and it is back to an opt-in system in the States here. So I don't kind of see it as a Trojan horse thing where, again, we weren't naive in believing that anyone was going to pay more attention to us because we signed to a major label, or that they should. We just knew that Sony was going to spend money releasing a record by some band at some point, and we felt that the messages and the agenda of Anti-Flag were important enough to take that from them and put it towards us. Yeah, talking specifically about the songwriting of For Blood and Empire, it's really interesting now because I look at American Spring as a very similar process to For Blood and Empire, and I think that the Terror State as well was a similar process to For Blood and Empire, and I think that that's why those three records, aside from the first record, Die for the Government, are kind of our tentpole records, and it just came to us really working hard. I mean, we were writing hours and hours a day, and not leaving the room until we felt like the song was the best version of itself that it could be. So in a lot of ways, it wasn't a punk record in the sense that we just went in and banged it out. We definitely were cognizant of the peaks and the valleys of the record, and making sure that it had a pulse to it that stayed interesting over the entire time. So we were definitely committed to extrapolating on what we had figured out to be the new Anti-Flag sound with the Terror State, and we just wanted to make it fuller. We wanted it to sonically be better than any of our records. We had a budget that we didn't typically have making an Anti-Flag record, and it was a really exciting process, an exciting time for the band, and we learned so much from it that sticks with us to this day, for sure. Yeah, speaking specifically to the lyrics, it's hard to transport back to what was actually going on in our heads at that time. It was now so long ago, but typically they had very little to do with George Bush himself as an individual, as much as it did with the surrounding cast, and trying to pull the curtain back to that. I mean, on For Blood and Empire, there's a song called The Project for a New American Century, and that's maybe my favorite song on the record, and it maybe doesn't get maybe doesn't get as much of a focus on it as some of the other songs, because it didn't necessarily catch fire with the punks, but I think lyrically it's the smartest song on the record, and it's talking about an issue that not a lot of people talk about or have talked about, which is this think tank organization called the Project for a New American Century that talked about how to regain America's superpower name, and it talked about creating a pipeline for the oil through the Middle East, and it said in there that we need a Pearl Harbor-esque event to happen on American soil to rally the support of an invasion of countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, and sure enough, September 11th happens and they get their Pearl Harbor-esque event, and I just think that there was so much going on that seemed to be much bigger than just George Bush is a bumbling idiot. So we got a lot of fingers pointed at us as the anti-Bush band, much as now we're getting them pointed at us as the anti-Trump band, and that's fine. We're against those people. I mean, they're racist, they're sexist, they're homophobic, they're transphobic. They need to be called out as such. But there's a cast of characters that are just as despicable and vile, and we're working to raise awareness on them as well. Yeah, for Blood and Empire, the recording session was amazing. We did it in LA. We had never made a record in LA before, and have access to that much instrumentation, that many cool studios, that many cool, talented people. Like, we had a guy play percussion on the record who, worked on all the Rick Rubin stuff. The guy who produced the record alongside us, Dave Schiffman, he was a Rick Rubin guy, and we were in Sunset Sound, which is this huge, beautiful, historic building that had made all these cool records. So we were wide-eyed, for sure, and it was very exciting to us. And there's a lot of moments that weren't lost on us there. I think one of the coolest things we did was in the middle of tracking the first week or so, we left to play 2 shows with Green Day, and we left the studio sitting up. And so it was 2 days where Anti-Flag stuff was just in there, up in the studio, and we were in Montreal and Toronto playing shows with Green Day. And I remember the producer, Dave, being like, "You guys are just gonna leave?" And we were like, "Yeah, we're gonna go leave." And it was a really cool moment. I think that it's really funny because the ultimate thing about being a punk rock band and then signing to a major label is this idea that you're doing it as a mouthpiece to reach a wider audience, or we're doing this because we need to get our message out there, and that's something that people said that we said, but we never said. And again, because we weren't of this belief that what we were doing was going to catch on in the mainstream. We knew that that RCA signing us, they had hoped that would happen, but the gamble was in their world. We were just going to be Anti-Flag, and we delivered the most political record of our band's life up until that time. And I think that that's one of the things that I really look back fondly upon, is they didn't realize how in-depth the record was going to be. It was a 30-page booklet. It had die cuts. It had all kinds of things. We really held their feet to the fire to put that contract to the test, where the artistic freedom of Anti-Flag remained ours, and they didn't have much of a say in how it was going to look or how it was going to feel and what it was going to sound like. So yeah, that's really that was really cool to us. And we were more expecting resistance from our audience at that moment, who were upset with us for signing to a major label, but we also had a lot of faith in the record, that people would love the record and would see past it and recognize that the Clash and the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and those are the reasons why we're playing punk rock, and those bands were on major labels, and you can still make great records and not submit yourself to trying to chase the dragon of pop culture. And we were not interested in that. And again, people talk about it like we're not called Anti-Flag. Like, there's a huge road and hill to climb when your band is named Anti-Flag and they're going to go to radio or something like that in Wisconsin or Illinois, or you look at a map of this election and pick a place in the middle and say, go try to put the Press Corps on the radio there. It's not going to happen. So we were reserved to know that we were going to maintain what we had created. If they sold one more record than we would before, we saw that as a success. But ultimately, we knew that we were putting out a record that was important for the band's life of Anti-Flag, and we were just glad to be spending Sony's money to do it. Yeah, talking about video games is really funny, going back to Pat. Like, Pat hates everything, and he was like, video games train the kids for wars. And I have played ice hockey my entire life, and whenever I heard that there was interest from EA to do the NHL Game Series, and I was like, "You're not taking this from me, man." So it was really like it was really more about us as people and less about like the band and the politics of it. You know, sometimes you have to put yourself in a situation where you're like, "Hey, I've committed to creating this art, to spreading this empathy, and again, that's an opportunity that someone else is going to take. There's going to be another song on there. We feel more confident that our song is valuable, that our song is about empathy, that our song is about caring about more than just ourselves. And we saw that as an opportunity to just stick our nose in a place that it didn't belong, and so we did. Yeah, I think, going back to Project for a New American Century, that's a song that I love playing live, and it's one that we throw in here and there, and um, again, people might not know it, but I care about it so much, and the other guys in the band care about it so much. I think we do a pretty good job of sharing it with people so that they see our passion for it and are attracted to that. Obviously, like, This Is the End, The Press Corps, Cities Burn, $1 trillion. Those songs are staples in the show. War Sucks, Let's Party is the staple in the show because the record really connected with people. Yeah, I don't necessarily see it as like a pride thing as much as I just see it like really understanding that those songs captured a moment in time that people really identify with, and they don't, unfortunately, live in a state where they're irrelevant. I think that a song like The Press Corps is extremely relevant for what's happening in American politics right now, what's happening in global politics right now with Le Pen in France, with Donald Trump in America, with Brexit in England. This is about the media's failure as a job to be the watchdog of the powerful and speak truth to power. And it's up to us to share empathy and share information amongst ourselves so that we can really work to combat them. And that's what the Press Corps is about, and I think it's very apropos for 2016. Yeah, I mean, changing the record isn't something that I think about a lot. I think that maybe Confessions of an Economic Hitman would be a few beats per minute faster. Slow song on the record. I think that maybe we would trim some fat here and there, but the overall gist of the songs would be the same, and the songs that made the record would be the songs that made the record. So Forbidden Empire isn't one that we have a lot of regrets for. Yeah, I really think that I really think that it is a tentpole anti-flag record for a reason, and there's no sense in meddling with it. It did a good job of capturing where we were at that time, and that was one of the things that we learned as well, is that records serve this purpose of being a document of where you were. Maybe when we started the band, we were a bit more naive and felt like, okay, if we write this song, we can impact people in such a way that this issue will be changed tomorrow. So it's like, the song comes out, people hear it, world's different, anti-flag wins. That doesn't really happen. What happens is, song comes out, people hear it, people connect, you go and you play shows, there's a whole community of people also doing the same type of art, they meet together, slow incremental change happens, but people realize and recognize that they're not alone. That's what we got from punk rock, and that's what we're hoping to share. So trying to reshape things so that people connect with it maybe a different way isn't something I'm really interested in doing. I'm more excited about the fact that people connected with it at all, and that we have this opportunity to come to Australia and share these songs again. And some of them for the first time, like Emigre, the third track on the record, it's a song we truly believed in but never played it live, and now we get to. So it's a really great opportunity for us. Speaking about Donald Trump, and where he fits in. You know, again, talking about the press corps, talking about their failure to call him out on his blatant racism and sexism and homophobia and bigotry in the face of ratings, and it's a failure of the for-profit media who obviously have put their ratings, put their budgetary lines ahead of the people of America. And, you know, speaking out about the problems that we're focusing on with the record and whether they still need addressed, absolutely they still need addressed. I mean, we play Fuck Police Brutality every show. And, you know, the police in America kill 2 people every day. It is a epidemic in our country. And those songs exist for that reason, to say, hey, these are the people that don't believe in this. These are the people that are standing up and fighting for this, and fighting for economic and social justice. And that's what For Blood and Empire is about, and that's why it's a record that we work on and carry with us 10 years later. Thanks, guys.